The Song of the Fae Father. There is a song the rain sings as it falls upon the leaves of Ireland's hawthorn trees. It is a song that only the Fae can hear, for it tells of their beginnings. They call it the Song of the Fae Father. This haunting song cannot be sung with a man's tongue, nor can he understand the ancient language of the rain. But should a fairy choose to tell you the story at the root of this song, it would tell you this. Once upon a time, when Ireland was young and shone like an emerald, she was covered in dense and fertile forests. In the oldest of these, there grew the first great trees, each with its own attendant spirit. The cleverest and trickiest of these was the spirit of the hawthorn tree, who was often so busy in his shenanigans with the other tree spirits that he neglected his duties to the hawthorn. So much so that one spring a raven had begun to build her nest high in the tree's thorny branches. The spirit hadn't bothered to shoo the bird away, but had instead watched lazily as she had toiled, twisting twigs to her will and lining the nest she had created with soft moss and feathers plucked from her own body. In truth, it hadn't been of much interest to the hawthorn spirit, except for the fact that he now had to put up with the bird's noise, for ravens the world over are known for their rough and rowdy natures. And so the spirit ignored her as best as he could and went about his own business, sometimes attending to the hawthorn tree's needs, but mostly making mischief with the other tree spirits. That was until one moonless night, when a late frost had fallen on the ancient forest. The spirit became chilled through and thought to himself how warm the eggs of the raven must be, huddled beneath her in their mossy nest. This he pondered on a while, before it dawned on him how funny it would be to slip beneath the sleeping bird. The hawthorn spirit imagined her rowdy calls when she found him there, warm amongst her clutch of eggs the next morning, and how the other tree spirits would laugh to see it. With this in mind, he climbed the tree and slipped beneath the brooding bird. The spirit had been right. It was indeed wonderfully warm, but he found to his displeasure that the eggs of the raven made it impossible to get comfortable. For no matter what way he twisted, there was always a hard egg encroaching on the part of the nest that he was most eager to sleep in. And so, one by one, he pushed them from the nest, each falling to be smashed to pieces amongst the thorny branches of the tree. The spirit, now warm and free from the eggs, soon fell into a deep slumber below the raven mother. The next morning, the raven spirit was awakened by the cries of the raven, who had seen the speckled blue shells of her eggs shattered amongst the thorns of the tree, and who now knew her clutch to be lost. The raven mother opened her beak wide and called again and again the name of the raven god, beseeching him that he might take revenge upon the hawthorn spirit. Hearing her cries, the raven god summoned the spirit to the great high branches of the first oak tree, where he held his court, so that the hawthorn spirit might answer for his crimes. After much rowdy discussion amongst the birds, the judgment was passed that the spirit would be forced to take a body of flesh and bones and be subject to all the pains and sufferings that this would bring. Furthermore, the god of the raven said that he himself would pluck the eyes from the hawthorn spirit's new body the moment they opened, so the spirit would never again see the beauty of the great Irish forest. The spirit was forced to agree to this sentence, but pleaded with the raven god that his punishment might be carried out in his beloved hawthorn tree, where, he assured the god, the tree's thorns would pierce his new flesh, making his penance all the greater. The god of ravens was as thirsty for blood as any god, and readily agreed that this would be done. And so, amongst the thorny boughs of the hawthorn, the spirit was given a body of flesh and bones. And when this was bestowed upon him, the thorns did indeed pierce his new flesh, and with the voice of a man he cried out, much to the delight of the raven god. The spirit of the hawthorn tree was still as clever a trickster as he had been before the bestowing of the flesh, and as the god of ravens leaned forward and plucked the first of his eyes, he broke a sharp thorn from the hawthorn tree, and with shaking, bloody fingers plunged it deep within the heart of the god. The raven god gave a rattling cry, and as his heart pumped the last of his blood from the fatal wound, the spirit cupped his new hands to collect it, lifting it to his lips so that he could drink deeply of it. For a second time he was transformed, finding himself now to be not quite spirit, not quite man, but a little more godlike than both. The spirit of the hawthorn tree had become something else, something the forest had never before seen, and something it would never again rid itself of. He was the first of the race that would become known by all as the Fae. High above in the branches of the trees, the ravens cried for the loss of their god, for they knew him to be extinguished from the world. And this they still do at the dawning of each day, in the hope that he might one day return. Raventhorn, for this was the name the first of the Fae had taken for himself, roamed the vast Irish forest for years, learning his new powers and growing strong. But he soon began to feel the keen pain of true loneliness, for he was now shunned by the spirits of the forest, as they knew him to be something strange, something other. As he sat in a clearing one day, lamenting his sad and lonely life, a tiny pale blue egg fell from a nearby chestnut tree and smashed beside his foot. This intrigued Raventhorn, and he climbed the old tree to see what was going on. And there he found in an immaculate little chaffinch's nest a great fat cuckoo chick that was, even as he watched, in the process of pushing the next of the eggs from the nest. Raventhorn laughed aloud, for how like himself was this fat little bird with its habit of pushing eggs from nests. It was then that Raventhorn had been struck with an idea, and he made a plan that only a trickster would have thought of. When the next moonless night came along, Raventhorn took the thorn that still carried the blood of the raven god upon it, and this he drove into the palm of his left hand, adding to it his own dark blood. The fairy then slipped quietly amongst the branches of the trees, and at each nest he came to, he used the bloodied thorn to pierce one egg within it, be they raven, robin, or wren. His work done, he waited, and sure enough, within a moon's turn, the eggs had hatched from them, and from them climbed the first fairy children of Ireland, each one as different in appearance and temperament as the birds whose eggs they had hatched from, and each as clever a trickster as Raventhorn himself. Soon the children of Raventhorn spread throughout the dark wooded places of Ireland, and on stormy days they gather in the boughs of the hawthorn trees, so that they might hear the song of the Fae Father, as it is played by the rain upon their leaves. The end.